Okay, Wednesday, 22nd of October 2025. So, Adrian's daily vlog, sharing smart stuff men should know. What to consider when borrowing money, when someone lends you money. There's three main things. How much and the terms, how much interest paying and how long. What to do with the money, and what how to pay it off, an exit strategy, how to service the debt. So really, you want to say how much. Naturally, you want to get as cheap as possible, as long as possible, as cheap as possible, and maybe you could say with collateral. Collateral meaning you put something up, pristine collateral like Bitcoin, for example, because then you could say your personal name is not attached to it in terms of your credit score, for example, but this collateral is, and if something goes wrong, it comes from the collateral itself. But that implies you got enough collateral, enough money in the first place, enough equity, in order to get this loan easily. But if you want uncollateralized, quote unquote, because there's always some collateral involved, it's your name at stake, which implies legal repercussions later on. If things go wrong, with it's collateralized, they take the bank, for example, take the proceeds from the capital. Otherwise, it's your own personal name. Now, a company or individual, let's keep it simple. You're on the line, you're at stake, you've got skin in the game. So it's collateral generally better. Because fundamentally, never be a forced seller. And that's something we'll get onto later on. But ideally, in an idealistic world, as cheap as possible, as long as possible. Very nice. 0% for 1,000 years, for example. A nice exaggeration, but okay. And then, before you even enter the trade, the contract, this agreement, you need to know what you're going to spend the money on. What you're going to do with it, how you're going to allocate it here, there, here. And you could argue even doing nothing with it is a viable strategy as well, because you could say it's just liquidity tucked away just in case, a rainy day, just in case. You could argue. But even then you could say, well, that's redundant. You might as well take out the loan on as favourable terms as possible when and if you need the money for something. But nonetheless, you need a plan. And the trick really is we need to be arbitraging, getting the difference. You're borrowing at 1%, or you're investing at, say, 10%, that 9% spread is your net profit. Ooh, that's the trick. That is the difference between good and bad debt, as Robert Kiyosaki would mention. But in economics and finance, we call this consumer debt. And the other one, there's no name for it really, but we could say productive. You're putting that money to good use. Consumer debt is essentially you borrow money to buy consumer goods. Vacation, nice toys, electronics, a car, etc. In one way you could say doodads, but these things that don't have a material income, a direct relationship to income. A holiday, oh, I need free time, away from the things. Yes, but versus consumer credit, consumer debt versus building a factory, building a business, increasing advertising, investing in some fashion, and that provides a direct income. That's what we need to be thinking about before even taking out the money. Where to allocate it, what to do with it. You've got this cash on favourable terms, what do you do with it? Perfect. Another thing to consider afterwards is the exit strategy, how to service the debt. So you might say, okay, let's borrow this and we have to pay, let's say, £100 a month. That's the capital and the interest. Okay, very good. Paying down the debt to service it. Okay, but where's that £100 going to come from? Oh, and ideally you want to say it comes from the money invested itself, that 9% spread. Because you don't want to be buying things, say nice cruise, and having to pay down this debt by working. Because what you're doing fundamentally with loans is you're essentially time traveling. You're taking future earnings and having it right here, right now, at the expense, the cost of interest. Meaning, over the next 12 months, you could earn £12,000, or you can borrow £12,000 right now and then spend the next 12 months paying it off, for example. Or you borrow the money, you invest it somehow, you earn more income, that pays for itself, it services the £100 a month and extra, and that compounds or pays down the debt, buying more assets or paying down the debt. Interesting. Very, very interesting. So the ideal scenario would be borrowing as much as possible, as cheap as possible, for as long as possible, and investing it in something that increases income as much as possible. Wow. And then you could say then, do you want to pay down the debt or do you want to compound the income here? Both work. It's a kind of subjective philosophical choice because you might say by paying down the debt, you're moving closer to the goalpost, your target, your desire, that plan. No, yeah, no. By compounding income, you're moving closer. By paying down the debt, you're getting the goalpost, the end goal, closer to you. It's the same thing. It's just how you want to play it. Pay down debt or compound. There's no right or wrong answer. It's very much of a balance. But you could say, on average, on balance, compounding is ever so slightly more assertive and aggressive, because you might say, right, we've compounded it so much that it's producing, £1,000 a month, and 10% of that goes towards servicing the debt. And that 10% is extremely manageable, exponentially easier to handle and manage and sort out. It's an afterthought. So then in the future, you keep compounding it. In the future, you could pay off that debt like that. Meh. Move on in life. It's that kind of attitude towards it. But also, servicing the debt is important because you need an exit strategy. And this is something I overlooked over the past few years with a few other things in life here and there. Because you can get onto the contract easily, get started, but how do you leave? How do you exit, really? Otherwise, it's a roach motel. You can check in but never leave. But in the context of this loan, mortgage, or anything really, borrowing cash in some fashion, you can take it on. Anyone can sign the document. But how do you leave the document? How do you terminate the contract at a later date? Like I just said, you can have the income compounded so much, you can pay it off like that. Or you could say, right, well, paying off £100 a month. Okay, £100 a month is this many weeks, this many months. Okay, right. So in 12 months or 24 months, it's paid off. Perfect. That's important. The exit strategy, I've come to realise, kind of not the hard way, but the medium way over the past few months or so, is almost as vital as it's basically everything, the entire thing. Because that goes back to what I said earlier about never being a forced seller. Because if you're going to leave something, this contract, you want to leave it on your terms. Fundamentally, you want time on your side. That's something even deeper, an even deeper way of looking at it. Time on your side, so you would terminate the contract on your terms, not being forced, having a margin call, or this debt has accumulated so much that you're compelled to do something that you don't want to do. Bailiffs, for example, are a good idea. I mean, a good notion, a good thing to consider and be aware of. But because you managed it so well, you were thinking months and months and years in advance, and you had an idea what to do with the money, you can leave the contract like that, i.e., like that, you can just pay it off. And that's incredibly empowering, because that ultimately means that you can end this contract anytime you want when you've achieved a certain level, which is very empowering. I had an interesting scenario just under a year ago, and there was an interesting little dilemma, which I totally foresaw coming, and some technicalities later, one or two phone calls later, and it was irrelevant conversations, but because I had planned it so far in advance, I was able to handle this little thing like that, and it was just absolutely forgettable. The numbers were just ridiculous. But it was the fact that I was able to handle it like that, because I had so much foresight, meant that it was not a problem. I wasn't compelled to do anything I didn't want to do. The exit strategy was thought out and strategized well in advance before even signing the dotted line. The exit strategy is fundamental. And that goes not just finance, with everything really. You do something, you go there, you buy this, you could even say the opposite, you don't buy this, so in the future how would you undo that decision so you can buy it, things like that. What's the exit strategy? Think. It kind of goes into the idea of before any action you take, you have to understand the entire thing from every single possible angle, analysing it from all sorts of angles and through different lenses, before even taking one decision, one step, before signing anything. That thing, you need to study it immensely, be slow, It's a nice phrase. Slow to, what was it now? Slow to anger and quick to caution, something like that. I can't remember, but strategize immensely before taking any decisions. And you can go deeper to say, well, in life, you want to have a scorecard, and this is Warren talking now. One idea I got from him. If a scorecard of 20 actions you can take, and you might want to take one action every 5 years, one decisive action every 5 years. That's well thought out, well thoroughly understood. Because one thing, I'm going on a slight tangent, but this is extremely poignant. One thing I picked up in trading years ago is that we are disciplined traders. We want quality trades, not quantity trades. So if you're going to be doing stuff with loans and money, we need to be thinking quality, not quantity, and think the entire process through entirely, from who to lend from, what to invest it in, and how to exit the contract. Everything needs to be thoroughly planned out from all kinds of angles and lenses. In a sense, a financial lens, okay, what about interest lens, okay, psychological lens, okay, anthropological lens, and beyond. And going into think years in advance. Powerful. Very powerful stuff. Yeah. But otherwise, Adrian's daily vlog, sharing smart stuff men should know. Subscribe for more, and you will see me tomorrow.